What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have quite a few things that we're going to be talking to you about today. Today's going to mainly be basically a conditions video because I've been looking at the climatology, I've been looking at the models, I've been looking at some of the conditions, and as hurricane season continues to go on, we're seeing better and better and better probabilities of tropical development, and this will be a kind of a video of, okay, this is happening right here, because we had 94L that kind of just didn't do anything. It's still an open wave that's heading towards the Lesser Antilles, but at this current point, it's not going to form. It's not exactly dissipate, I would say, but it's more so kind of an open wave. So at this point, the main question I have now for right now, and the main question I pose looking at this in this video is, okay, when's our next big chance for development at this current point? So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive right into it. So starting off, we're going to start with satellite imagery. A tropical wave just came off the coast of Africa. Right here, there's another tropical wave that's about to hit the Lesser Antilles. For those that are going to be that are tuning in from to this video from that region, you're going to want to watch for flash flooding over there. That's something that I kind of take pretty seriously, especially considering a lot of the floodings that we've had here in the United States, with the Texas flood, with Ellicott City in 2018, and all of those regions. There's also the Puerto Rico flash floods from Hurricane Maria as well. So that's kind of a threat that I've taken seriously. Oh, and also Hurricane Helene in 2024 because of what happened in western North Carolina. And ultimately, what we're seeing right here is we're seeing, still interestingly enough, some spin with this wave right here. Although more convection has started to develop over the last little while, it's pretty disorganized, not going to develop into anything, I would say. But what you're noticing right here is it's heading towards the Antilles. Could definitely bring some very heavy downpours, some flash flooding as well. So you're going to want to pay attention to that as well. But shifting over to the eastern Atlantic, as you can see right here, tropical wave just came off. You're noticing a lot more convection firing off with it just south of the Cabo Verde Islands right here. That's going to be pretty interesting to kind of take a look at and take a quick gander at as well, showing the true color imagery. There is some Sahara dust and there is some dry air to the north of it as well. That's also reflected on water vapor imagery as well. Yeah, there's some dry air to the north of it right here. There is a bit more moisture that's continuing to move into parts of the Atlantic over here and parts of the northern tropics right here, right on the eastern edge of the ocean right here around Morocco and the Sahara Morocco and those areas right there, and parts of North Africa, which I think is pretty interesting to say the very least. But yeah, you have some dry air, that's mainly Sahara dust and all of that. We're going to talk more about that a little bit later in this video, but then you're having another tropical wave, actually a pretty strong tropical wave too, as the monsoon season in that part of the Sahel really starts to turn up. That's going to be coming off the coast of Africa in the next 36 to 48 hours, so you're going to want to pay attention to that one as well. But ultimately, these waves right here, they don't have the best shot of development right now, but what they're ultimately doing is they're allowing the atmosphere in this part of the main development region and this part in the tropics to get more moist and kind of start to mix out more of the Sahara dust. That already part of it is heading towards Europe anyway, but whatever Sahara dust is left in this region of the Atlantic, that's starting to slowly mix out, slowly moisten up the atmosphere, and allow for better and better conditions as we get later into the season. So that's kind of what we're looking at right here with the satellite imagery. We can go right here. Shifting over to the conditions very quickly, because we are going to be talking about this day. We're also going to be showing some ensembles. We're going to be showing some model runs as well, particularly with the conditions right here. So shifting over to this, we're going to start with our water temperatures right here. Once again, like we did yesterday, we'll go ahead and start with the main development region since we're in that region. Water temperatures continue to increase in parts of the MDR. You're looking at 28 degrees Celsius widespread across much of these regions. 28 degrees Celsius, for those of you who do not know, is about 82 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you who live in the United States and her territories. And that is pretty warm water to say the very least, and that is quite a situation that you're going to want to consider because that's more than warm for tropical development. You're going to want to pay attention to that, particularly as we get to peak hurricane season, since that's going to be here sooner rather than later. These water temperatures are only going to continue to increase until that point, especially in the western half of the Atlantic as well, which we'll show you in just a second. But ultimately, in the main development region, you're looking at 28 plus degrees Celsius, 29 degrees Celsius along the coast of South America and in areas of deeper out into the ocean as well, 30 degrees Celsius off the coast of French Guiana right here. So that also area is also warming up, and we'll show you the climate reanalyzer in just a second, also to kind of show you just how much it is warmed up. Shifting over towards more of the Atlantic Basin region right here, more and more warming continues. You're noticing these 29 degrees Celsius waters continuing to trickle further and further and further to the south as well. That's a pretty concerning thing to take a look at right there. More 30 degrees Celsius waters too along the Gulf Stream and parts of the subtropics and off the coast of the Bahamas right here around Great Abaco and Grand Bahama. You're noticing 30 degrees Celsius. That's 86 degrees Fahrenheit for those who don't use the metric system. So that is a pretty concerning thing to take a look at, and these waters are only going to continue to warm up due to favorable trade winds and all of that as well. And even in parts of the Caribbean, which we'll go ahead and shift into next, you're noticing yesterday we were talking about this kind of cold wake over here in this region right here. That's starting to recede pretty considerably as well. Before we were noticing it was getting pretty connected. Right here, getting all the way to Hispaniola. Now it's one small pocket of 27 degrees Celsius waters, 28 degrees Celsius waters have started to take over across much of the Caribbean and parts of this cold wake as well. You're starting to notice the water temperatures really starting to turn up in that region as well. And then you're noticing a few isolated areas of 29 degrees Celsius along Hispaniola, around Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands as well. You're noticing that as well. That's only going to continue to increase. And you're noticing warmer waters, 30 to potentially degrees Celsius potentially off the coast of Haiti, off the coast of Cuba, entering the Gulf region as well. That's something to be concerned about. And shifting over to the Gulf, there's really not much else to say because at this point I feel like I'm beating on a dead horse, especially with the Gulf. The Gulf is at close to cracking 30 degrees Celsius across the entire region right here. And showing you the climate reanalyzer, I can kind of give you an idea of what's going on with that. So here's the climate reanalyzer right here, showing the Gulf region first, taking a quick look at that. We're at 29.94 degrees Celsius on average in this part of the Gulf right here. In this small area that we're taking a look at right here, that is very warm water. That's among the warmest in the Atlantic right there. And once we crack 30 degrees Celsius right here, oh man, that makes me even more concerned right there because that's essentially a hot tub. Not a hot tub, but a bathtub, essentially across an entire synoptic region. And essentially what that's going to ultimately do is that water's not going to stay at the surface either. It's going to get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper down. And we'll show you the OHC in just a second because we're seeing more of an upswing, especially along the loop current as well today in those maps right there. But by and large, once we get to 30 degrees Celsius, oof. If you're along the coast and first of all, if you're along the coast and you're thinking about swimming in these waters, I would be very careful just because of how warm these are. I would not stay in them for very long, especially if you're along like the Florida Keys, along the Florida coast as well, where the water tends to be the shallowest. That would be very concerned about that because I remember a couple of years ago I talk about this quite a bit on the channel. We had water temperatures off the Everglades of over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and that was killing off ecosystems, killing off coral, killing off a lot of things, and it was really concerning for me as a forecaster at the time, thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to make hurricane development even worse, which at that time I admittedly didn't understand the concept of ocean heat content. Now I do now. But basically, that's kind of my concern with this right here. Not only are these warmer temperatures going to be bad for tropical development, they're going to be environmentally bad as well, particularly for like fish that live in the region, for like coral reefs, for other environmental concerns as well that I have with it as well. So that's something to take into consideration as well. Looking at the Atlantic MDR, still warming up pretty considerably right here. It has kind of leveled off just a little bit, but that's only going to continue to surge as we get later into the season right here. The peak usually starts around late September, actually. It usually peaks around late September, which is pretty interesting because normally what you notice with this is starting around early to mid-August is when you get a better odds of tropical development, and you start seeing more waves coming off the MDR that kind of start to indicate, okay, this is something that might actually develop right here. And then even still, the water temperatures continue to warm up even after these tropical cyclones really start to organize and develop and strengthen and tap into that water temperature as well, which I do think is kind of intriguing to say the very least. But with that being said, though, late September for being its peak right there, you're going to want to pay attention to this because you still have 2 months of warming in the MDR. And if you're in the Lesser Antilles and the Caribbean, you're absolutely going to want to pay attention to this because that puts you guys more in the line of risk, at least in terms of water temperature and OHC. Regardless. Now looking at the North Atlantic as a whole, you're still seeing these water temperatures increase, but it has kind of slowed down a little bit. That's to be typical. There's not as much, there's some variability with that as well, but the average temperature is still at 24 degrees Celsius. That's about 75 degrees Fahrenheit for those who living in the U.S. and her territories. But by and large, what you're looking at with this right here, at least with all these areas, is water temperature continues to increase. That's going to continue in some regions after the end of July. Some regions start to level off in August. But basically, you're starting to see all the ingredients starting to get cooked in. You're starting to see more of the conditions starting to kind of lean more so. Hold on one second. You're starting to notice everything starting to come together, and that's kind of the main thing I'm highlighting with this right here. Looking at the ocean heat content. Ocean heat content is a bit of an issue, ladies and gentlemen. Looking at the loop current, we're seeing areas cracking 200 OHC. 200 OHC. And for those of you who do not know just how much energy that is, 50 OHC is conducive for decent strengthening. 100 OHC is conducive for rapid strengthening. 200 OHC is conducive for explosive strengthening. Now, explosive strengthening is a bit more of a kind of a general term. It's not an official term by any terminology, but it's typically kind of considered anything over 2 to 3 millibar drops per hour with tropical cyclones. Like rapid intensification is 1 millibar drop an hour for 24 hours, or a 35 mile per hour wind increase. Just double everything with explosive intensification. That's kind of the general gist that you have with that, and why I throw that term around. But by and large, what you're noticing in the Western Atlantic is all this OHC continues to bubble up, and you're noticing more and more of this OHC starting to turn up in parts of the Eastern Caribbean as well, and in parts of the MDR. You're starting to notice this OHC moving further and further and further up to the north as well, so you're going to want to pay attention to that as well. Atlantic Basin continues to be a very big concern, and a lot of this 50-plus OHC waters right here are starting to consolidate, because before they were more scattered all over the place. Now they've kind of consolidated, and they've kind of started to kind of build back up and kind of interconnect with each other. So that's also a pretty scary thing to kind of look at as well. But with that being said, though, we're going to go ahead and shift over to trade winds, moisture, wind shear, all of that stuff to kind of talk about, okay, how is everything else starting to look? Because you're talking about the water temperatures a lot, but what is the wind shear and what are the trade winds looking like? Well, let's start with our trade winds, ladies and gentlemen. Here's what we got going on right here. Trade winds are still very favorable for warming right here, but then you're noticing around August 5th, you're noticing these trade winds. You're starting to notice all this purple right here. That's kind of an indicator right there of less warming right here across parts of the Caribbean and the main development region. You still have that. You still have those favorable trade winds for that in parts of the Eastern Atlantic right here, and in parts of the Gulf right here, but across much of the Caribbean and in the western part of the MDR, you are noticing kind of a switch right there from the European. So that's kind of interesting to take a quick look at. I'm going to send this to my guys at Storms United, get their take on it, get their thoughts on it. And then we can see and go from there and go, okay, how is this going to exactly evolve? Because obviously we're going to need some more data considering how far out this is. But I do want to highlight that we're noticing a bit of a switch starting in early August, and I want to pay very close attention to that. So now shifting over to the wind shear and taking a look at that, just kind of trying to see how this will ultimately correlate. But looking at this right here, here's what you have with your wind shear right here. Wind shear continues to fluctuate. In parts of the MDR, it's definitely quite low, especially for the next few days right here. You do have increases of wind shear in parts of it, particularly in the eastern part of the MDR, so you're going to want to keep a very close eye on that as well. But ultimately, you notice starting around the 30th of July, wind shear kind of returns to what we saw earlier in the month and collapses. But look at the big story I've kind of forgotten right here is the Caribbean. Before, it was concentrated. Before, you saw strong shear in that region. Now it's kind of fluctuating and collapsing and going all over the place. Right here. Before it was just consistent. Now it's just collapsing and just moving all over the place. It becomes a lot more volatile, not in terms of its shear strength, but in terms of the fluctuations right there. It's not as consistent. And you're having pockets of low shear, pockets of high shear. It's very interesting to see how that pans out. And that stronger shear does start to return a little bit as you get through early August right here. But that is a big development right there. In that region. That's kind of telling me, okay, the wind shear's collapsing over there. If you're in the Caribbean, you're going to want to watch out and watch this very closely. So that's kind of your wind shear. And just to take a quick look, I want to see what the wind shear anomalies are like as well, just to kind of pique my fancy right here. Wind shear definitely stronger than average to start with, but across much of parts of the subtropics, across parts of the Atlantic basin, you're noticing weaker wind shear than average. You're noticing more average wind shear than average. You're noticing a lot more of these mixed signals across much of the Atlantic right here, but instead of just a huge plethora of stronger shear right there. So that's something to pay attention to. You're noticing these weaker shear values, and that's something you're going to want to pay attention to moving forward. So that's kind of what we're seeing with that. I know I kind of glossed over it, but it kind of gives me a general gist as to what's going to be happening. Now, looking at the big thing that I've been paying attention to, and that is the Sahara dust, and that is the dry air. Because at this point, wind shear is less of an issue for me, and I've said this like a broken record, but it's more so the dry air that I have issues with in terms of why tropical development doesn't start typically until August. It's mainly because of this right here. Now, I will make it clear, there is less dry air than average, but there's still quite a lot of it regardless of that. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and shift over. Let's kind of see what the dry air is going to be doing, because you do have more and more of these moisture surges, and I was talking earlier in this video about how these tropical waves are going to be moving in and helping moisten up the atmosphere quite a bit. That's exactly what's happening right here. Now, granted, you do have a bit of a dry air surge in parts of the MDR around July 26th and the 27th right here, but then you're noticing you're noticing less dry air in this region right here off the coast of Africa, and another burst of Sahara dust heading towards Europe as well, so that's something to pay attention to as well. And then as you're starting to notice, the dry air does start to kind of weaken quite a bit at this current point. Yes, you're still getting humidities that are below 30% and all of that, but it definitely weakens considerably compared to what we were seeing especially earlier this year, and even from last year. That's something to pay attention to as well. There's a lot more moisture for this region to work with compared to what we were seeing previously, because before, what we had was pretty much we had Beryl and then our C-named storm last year, and then tropical development shut down for about a month because of all this dry air. But taking a quick look at the precipitable water, let's see what's going on with that. What do you know? There is more moisture to work with than the climatological average. There's even more moisture now to work with than there was last year, which is why I'm kind of holding with this early August type of situation when I think the tropics are going to wake up even more, and we're going to start seeing more and more of this development off the MDR and in other parts of the Atlantic as well. You still have the Caribbean, you still have the Central American gyre that I haven't gotten into, you still have a lot of these regions as well that could really start to turn up. All you need is a good MJO, and all you need is pretty much some dry air to get mixed out, especially with how the shear is going to be fluctuating, and especially with how the patterns are going to continue to get better and better for tropical development. So that's kind of your situation we're looking at right here. So this is something that we're paying attention to. We'll keep you updated on all of this here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But with that being said, we're closing the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you'd like to join the Storms United Discord server, the link to that will be in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.